Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast and welcome to Theory Thursday. On a Thursday we get together and we have a bit of a deep dive into one aspect of Blood Bowl. Whether it's stats or strats, our goal is to learn more, to get more out of this game that we love. Occasionally it helps us be a little bit better at Blood Bowl. Now this topic today is not a stat, it is not a strategy. This is all kind of about hobby and how you can be more effective, more efficient, a little bit thriftier and a little bit cleverer by using your teams and parts of your teams in other teams, so that all in all you got more teams with less painting. Okay, so I feel like I should explain what I mean by multi-use teams a little bit more. This came about by, well, we've all worked on projects and we've gone, oh, I can use this for this, I can use this for this, I can use my goblins for there. If you need to quickly proxy a team, you've got bits and pieces that work together. But this really comes from two aspects here. One is trying to put together Dungeon Bowl teams. It really gets you thinking about, actually, I've got this guy for this, so I could use it for this. So a classic example of this is the College of Shadow. Use War Dancers instead of Witch Elves if you've got War Dancers and you don't have Witch Elves. It's a solid stand-in. And that kind of got me thinking about, well, actually, what else is there? There's always like the super team theory that you've got where I can paint all these models together in one scheme and I can use them for different teams. Well, that's exactly what this is about. And it kind of came to a head when I was starting to plan out and painting up my Torchlight Orcs. Now, what Torchlight have done, and Grebo have done this as well, is they've produced an Orc team, and then they've added extra stuff in there so that you can also run it as a Black Orc team. And then you can kind of think, right, well, I've got my Black Orcs, and I've got my Orcs, and they kind of work at the same team. I've got the Goblins on the Orc team, they also work for the Black Orc team, and then I've got the Troll for the Black Orc team that also works for the Orc team, and I can take the Troll and the Goblins, and I can put them together with my Skaven team and use them for my Underworld team. And if I've got the Goblin special weapons, then I can use those Goblins from all of those teams and just add some special weapons. And it got me thinking about, actually, what are the groupings of teams that share players? Now, we're not just talking about one or two players here. We're talking about like groups of players, things that are going to be significantly easier for you to paint up. So if you're building an Orc team and you've got a couple of spare Black Orcs, well then you've got the makings of a Black Orc team. Or if you've got a Black Orc team and actually you go and get a box of Skaven, well then you've got Black Orcs and you've got Underworld and you've got Skaven, and how to kind of hybridize the teams. So the whole point here is that if you've got one paint scheme for your team, then you can kind of tie it in really nicely. You do half the work for like twice the teams, which is a really clever way of doing it. But also, something that I really love the idea of is building an even bigger element of a franchise. So Blood Bowl is weird like this. There is some stuff in the lore where this one team gets bought out by these people and they go and do this. And there's undoubtedly stories out there, untold millions of stories from your leagues where, you know, I've got the Neverbay Nightmares, but this year they're going to be a human team because they got bought out and they got replaced by humans. Actually, there is that element of an organic franchise within Blood Bowl. And actually, if you've got the makings of a Black Orc team and you upgrade them with some more Orcs and lose some Goblins and it becomes an Orc team one year, well, some of the Black Orcs and some of the Goblins and the Troll might still be the same players, and it builds up that franchise thing. So, you know, like I've got my, you know, I can't remember what I called my Black Orc team, my Orc team, the Wyverns, something Wyverns, can't remember. I've got the Wyverns, but I can run them as Goblins, I can run them as Orcs, I can run them as Black Orcs, and then you kind of, I've got the core of the team all painted up. Anyway, I thought we'd have a look at some of the parent kind of groupings. So I am unabashedly trying to inspire you to paint a little bit less, but game a little bit more. So this is my Orc, Black Orc, Goblin and Underworld multi-use team kind of layout. So this is what I've talked about. We've got Line Orcs, Blitzers, Black Orcs, Goblins, Thrower, Troll. That's the Orc team, right? Those are all the positionals that are available. And you can kind of spread them out. Now, I want to be clear that this is not an exhausting list, not by a long shot. For example, one thing that isn't on here is the potential of using a Savage Orc team as your Orc team and then being able to use them as Khorne. we're staying a little bit closer within like the sphere of kind of Games Workshop-y models. This is where we're going with, so they're not going to delve too deeply into the Teams of Legend either, because apparently they are free game when it comes to changing, and as kind of agile as your human team is, it does not include tiny little beer pigs, so I don't know what to say. Now, this is kind of the layout. So we've got Black Orcs. Now the Black Orcs in the Orc team are also going to be available for the Black Orc team. The Goblins also going to be available for Black Orcs, and the Troll also going to be available for the Black Orc team. So if you've got a Black Orc team, you've got those pieces that fit nicely into the Orc team, but they also transition this way as well. You've got Goblins, that also works for the Goblin team. They also work for the Underworld team, and so does the Troll. So you can see there's kind of a grouping here. So if you were starting to plan out an Orc team, and this is something that we see on Whit Wednesday quite a lot, is I'll buy a box of Orcs and I'll buy a box of Black Orcs, and that gives me 10 different, no, it gives you 8 different Black Orcs, which means you can use the Black Orcs and the Goblins from your Black Orc team, infiltrate them with your Orc team, you've maxed out your Orc team, and it kind of creates this one super big team that you're going to be able to use as one team or as another team. You paint the Goblins up for both, you paint the Black Orcs all in one scheme, and you just end up with a really cool looking collection of models that you can then take and go and run Orcs one week, go and run them as a tournament as Black Orcs the following week. Or, for example, with the Torchlight bits, they've got enough pieces in there to be Black Orcs, enough pieces in there to be Orcs. All you need to then do is add the secret weapons basically and a second Troll, and you've got enough for a Goblin team as well. And then, you know, depending on how much you want to extend it, you can also chuck in half a Skaven team and use the Goblins from your Black Orc team and half the Skaven team to make an Underworld team. There's a lot of close groupings here, and I think this is a really solid mixture. And if you've got one scheme that you love, for example, green, yellow and Agrax, which is apparently what I paint all of my models in, although I did paint orange, look at that. Not green or yellow. Close to yellow, I guess. The point is, you can plan out your team here, and with a smaller investment and a really cool unifying paint scheme, you end up with 20 models that you can use for 3 different teams. Now that's kind of like the green skin element. Let's move on to the human sphere. Okay, so this is the core bit here, is the human team. We've got linemen, catchers, blitzers, throwers, ogres and halflings, and as you can see here, there's quite a big spread. Now we got a bit far on one side of it. Anyway, the linemen. If you've got the point here, and this is a really salient point. If you've got a human team and you've got a nobility team, they are incredibly interchangeable. Now this came very much to the top when we started looking at building Dungeon Bowl teams for the Dungeon Bowl Championship. Well, I don't have human blitzers, but I've got nobility blitzers. Does it work? Yeah, it works. You can tell that they're blitzers. You can tell that they're something different. This works really well. So linemen are transferable between nobility and a human team. Catchers are missing from the nobility team, but you've got them in the human team. Blitzers will transfer across. Throwers will transfer across. The ogre will transfer across. From a nobility point, you've got to add bodyguards. From a human point, you've got to add catchers. Now, the cool thing is if you've got a nobility team, you run the bodyguards as your blitzers, basically, and you've maxed out your 4 blitzers. If you get 1 box of nobility, 1 box of humans, well, you can kind of interchange those pieces so that you've got one mess of human players. And then that could even link in with your OWA team. And this is something that nobility and humans fit so nicely into. So OWA, or World Alliance, the linemen, transferable. You're going to need them on the OWA team. Human linemen or nobility model linemen, perfect for the linemen. You know, blitzers, throwers, ogres and halflings, they're all models that work for OWA and humans, which makes sense because it's half the team. But if you've got a nobility team, the only one you're missing there is from the catchers. Now the cool thing is here, if you've got humans and you're running an ogre, you're running halflings, they transfer over like for like to the OWA team. And then you can even consider the fact that your human linemen form the core of so many teams. Now I've just put Renegades here for now, but if you think about it, the human lineman from your human team would work perfectly for thralls in a vampire team. You could paint up some vampires in the same scheme as your human team. You've got a vampire team with human lineman thralls, right? Nobility lineman with vampires, absolutely on point. Is such a great combination. But, you know, what else have we got? You've got Renegades, and Renegades is a cracking example. You've got the human lineman for the human lineman in the Renegades team. Perfect. Human linemen potentially also work for things like Marauders in Khorne, even Rotters in Nurgle, because they are just strength 3 looking dudes, okay? Makes a lot of sense. Thrower for Renegades. Depending on how you build your Renegades, don't come at me, I know the Thrower is, you know, bless him. Ogre, Renegades. Halfling, you need 1 Goblin. If you've got a Halfling, and you're using your human team as the core for your Renegades team, the Halfling can be the Goblin. Job done. You've got a big guy, you've got the Halfling, you've got the Thrower, you've got the Lineman. All you need to do is add an Orc, a Skaven, a Dark Elf, basically. And you're there with your Renegades team. That's 3 basically different models, and you can kind of treat yourself to a Goblin, because a mutated Goblin's a great thing. And you're ready to go with the Renegades team as well. Obviously you need some more big guys, but actually you take that human or nobility team and you are only a few players away from being able to swap it in for a vampire team, for a Renegades team, for an OWA team. And this is exactly the kind of thing that you can think, well, I've got nobility, actually I can get some cool looking vampires, I can go collecting, I can go looking, actually I feel like running this team, I can expand it up. And that's, like I said, we're not really touching Teams of Legend, but as it stands right now, it's a pretty close one. And talking Renegades, let's go into the Chaos realms here. So core Chaos roster, Beastmen, Warriors, Troll, Ogre, Minotaur. They don't get the Rat Ogre, that's just Renegades. Okay, so Beastmen. The Beastmen transfer perfectly, and so do Warriors. Okay, so Chaos Warriors, the Beastmen can be your Pestigors. Your Beastmen can be your Khorne Gors. Your Warriors can be your Khorne Bloodseekers, or the Nurgle Rotters. No. Bloaters, right? The Nurgle Warriors, okay? They transfer. The Warriors become your 4 Warriors, whether they are Khornate, Chaos Chosen, or Nurgle. You've got the Beastmen, fine. Your Beastmen are not going to be used in its entirety, but if you've got, you know, 8 of them painted up, you can use, you know, 2 to 4 of them to be your Khorne Gors, to be your Pestigors, on your Nurgle or Khorne team. You've got the Troll. It could be a nice tentacly messed up beast of Nurgle. You've got an Ogre or a Minotaur, would fit in absolutely perfect if you want to run your Chaos team as a Khornate team. And then all you've got to do is add Marauders / Rotters for those teams as well. So if you've got a Chaos team and you've got, for example, a human team, you've got human linemen, you add them to your Chaos team. So you paint your human team and your Chaos team in the same paint scheme, and you've got the ability to run Nurgle, Khorne, Chaos, and then you've got the spicy one at the end here, Renegades, which we've already talked about. But Marauders and Rotters from the Khorne team and the Nurgle team work great as linemen for the Renegades team. And in fact, one thing I haven't seen anybody do yet, probably because it's just incredibly subpar, is taking a Chaos kind of team and making a Chaos OWA themed team. What we also need to see is a non-Chaos Renegades team. Okay, the Dwarf as the Orc. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that. But anyway, this is the point. You've got the Chaos mixture here. You've got a Khorne team. Well, you're basically not very far away from being able to use those pieces again in all of these teams. And I thought I'd change it up a little bit for this one, because this is incredibly obvious. So Elven Union, Dark Elves, High Elves, and Wood Elves. When the Banath team came out, it was very evident that it would be perfect for High Elves and Elven Union. And why is that? Because they have got exactly the same positionals. Exactly the same. You've got Line Elves, you've got Blitzers, you've got Throwers, you've got Catchers. Perfect for running a High Elf team. They've got the same style models. They've got the same look, the same positionals. They can just be straight up used as High Elves or Elven Union. Perfect. If you've got 4 Blitzers, and we saw someone do this on Whip Wednesday with an old school High Elf team, they bought 2 of the made to order boxes, I think probably to max out on their Catchers, but what they also did was max out on their Blitzers, and that allowed them to use Dark Elves. And then it works both ways. If you've got a Dark Elf team, you've got those Blitzers, you've got the Runners who can be your Throwers, and that ties in really nicely. And who was it that did the STL Kickstarter most recently? Must have been Impact Miniatures. They did that Super Elf team with 23 different players. You had a bunch of Line Elves, you had some Blitzers, you had some Ball Carrier people, which would be your Throwers or your Dark Elf Runner, basically. You've got Catchers there for all of the teams except Dark Elves, although your Catchers could be used to represent your Assassins on a Dark Elf team. And then you've got your kind of lightly armoured dancey people. Witch Elves, War Dancers actually work quite nicely as an interchangeable piece. like I said, using the War Dancers as the Witch Elves in Dungeon Ball, because actually they've got that vibe. They've got that frenzied kind of look. War Dancers used to have frenzy in Warhammer, because that's what they did. Witch Elves, very, very similar. So actually, Elves as a pool, as a pool of teams, are really close together. And really, as long as your models are clear, you can use most of your elf teams as most other elf teams. Now, we are going to go a little bit Team of Legendy here, but we've got Dwarves, Chaos Dwarves, and OWA. Now, they're kind of stylistically similar. I mean, the Dwarves in OWA are just Dwarves, right? That's just a sprue of Dwarves. So you've got your Dwarves, you've got your Blockers, Blitzers, Runners, Troll Slayers, and the big guy. Now, the reason I've left the big guy in there is because, obviously, those guys fit perfectly into OWA. But what you can do is you can also incorporate half of a Chaos Dwarf team. Now, this is it. Some of these are kind of half measures, okay? But if you've got a Dwarf team, or you build a Chaos Dwarf team that then can be used backwards as OWA or as a Dwarf team, you get more use out of those models. And the reason I've put big guy there is because actually Death Roller is a fantastic idea of a player. In this edition, the rules have been less kind to it, but you know, there are some awesome Death Rollers out there that would make fantastic Minotaurs or Ogres for OWA. In fact, I'm waiting for someone to send us in a College of Fire with Death Rollers being used as Ogres, because I think it's a great way to get Death Rollers to the pitch. Except for just running a Dwarf team in Dorset Dungeon Bowl, which I'm hoping we'll see, because the Death Roller stays on the pitch the entire game. I'm really hoping someone's going to twig to that, because I love Death Rollers, it's just they're garbage. But actually, if you've got a cool Death Roller model, and you've got a cool bunch of Dwarf models, well, all you need to do is find a cool bunch of Hobgoblin-esque models, which quite frankly can just really be human linemen, or Chaos linemen, or Goblin models. Just something that makes it really evident that they are just blanket linemen. And the big guy is your Death Roller, and you've got this really cool Chaos Dwarf team using an OWA model set. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. There's some modelling opportunities here. I'm trying to keep it as close as possible to Games Workshop land, because obviously there's third-party teams out there that are just wild, wacky. The Slan team from Fanath can be used for multiple different teams. 3D printing your own teams can be used for a bunch of different stuff. You know, Artisan Guilds models have got loads of flexibility. But even Dwarves, you can mix them in with Chaos Dwarves and OWA, and you can have this one core team with different, like, Thunderbird 2 drop pod bits. Right, I've got my Dwarf team, I've got my Hobgoblins, now I've got my Chaos Dwarf team, I've got my Dwarf team, I've got my Humans, now I've got my OWA team. It's just a cool way to make the most out of your models. And the last kind of grouping we'll kind of finish on this one is the Underworld, Goblins, Skaven, and Snotlings. We kind of touched on this at the beginning, but Underworld as a core roster takes bits from different rosters, so kind of becomes the roundabout of Blood Bowl teams. We got Skaven, we got Goblins, we got Snotlings, we got Rat Ogre, we got Troll. So the Skaven players, you're only half a Skaven team away from having a Skaven team. The Rat Ogre is even going to translate nicely to your Skaven team. If you've got the Goblins from the Underworld team, you've already got at least one Troll. That means one Troll and some Goblin secret weapons, and you've fleshed out your Goblin team. Snotlings, you've got Snotlings for Underworld. All you need to do is just add the rest of the fun stuff from the Snotling, and you've potentially already got a Troll from your Underworld team. And this is it. When you start planning out a team, there's so much interchangeability that it works really well. Alright, I'm going to wrap up now. I know that we haven't really talked tactics or stats or anything like that, but this is something that has been brewing in my head, and it's a good theory, I think. I've not touched on so much. There's Norse and Amazon interchangeability, there's Amazon and Elven Union interchangeability. There's a ton of stuff you can do out there. Ogres and Snotlings forming one super team where you just paint 20 Noblars and Snotlings and you use them together with the positionals, or an assortment of big guys. You know, in fact, taking a Snotling team and then just adding like 6 Trolls to it gives you everything you could need. But the whole point is, don't think I need my human team, I need this other team. If you've got a human team, where else can you do that? How else can you make it? If you've got a nobility team, do you need to paint up 6 human linemen, or do you just use your nobility linemen and paint the different positionals in the same style as that nobility team and really start strengthening your franchise? Make it flexible, build that story, and just be like, yeah, you know what, we're running the B team today, and the B team plays more like nobility, and we've got the bodyguards in, but the A team plays more like humans because they're tier 2 and they get extra skills now. It was just an idea, and that's exactly what this show is about. So do let me know what you think, what teams you use as cross-purpose, what I've missed off, what other great ideas are out there for really just making the most of teams that can be multi-use. I think it's great. I'm very excited to do it with my Orc Wyvern team, mostly because I'm printing a Wyvern to be my giant, because what team doesn't have a giant? And we didn't even talk about giants. Giants. Anyway, I'm going to disappear. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.